Jiang Shengsheng gave all her best youth to Lu Mingfei, but who knew that the man would cruelly abandon her? At this time, she met another man. When she lay in the arms of another man, Lu Mingfei, who had always ignored Jiang Shengsheng, realized how wrong he was. The news of Miss Jiang's suicide was discovered on the third day after she hung up the phone. Because Miss Jiang was a solitary person who always kept to herself, no one knew she had died. It was not until the downstairs residents complained about water leakage that Miss Jiang was found with her wrists cut in the bathtub. That day, Miss Jiang wore a white gauze dress and put on makeup. Even though all the blood had been drained when she was found, she still had a strange kind of beauty. The police checked the address book and found that the only phone number with a note in Miss Jiang's phone was Jiang Shengsheng, and the note only had 2 words daughter. When Jiang Shengsheng got the news and rushed to the police station, he could only hold Miss Jiang's cell phone and cry inconsolably. She never knew that Miss Jiang had suffered from mental illness for many years, and in the end she was unable to let herself go. Miss Jiang had few relatives or friends, so her funeral was very simple, cremation, and burial in a piece of land. After Lu Mingfei knew about this, he said that he was on a business trip and asked Secretary Yang to come and help take care of it. He didn't even say a word of comfort to Jiang Shengsheng. A new grave was built in the cemetery. The sky was gray and the gloomy clouds pressed down, making people feel even more depressed for some unknown reason. Jiang Shengsheng looked at the black and white photo of Miss Jiang on the tombstone. Miss Jiang's face in the photo was always so cold and she never smiled. She looked back at Secretary Yang and asked, "Do you have any cigarettes?" Secretary Yang took out a pack of cigarettes from her bosom. She took the cigarette, opened it awkwardly, lit it, and took a puff. The taste of nicotine was a bit bitter, and it felt stuffy when she inhaled it into her lungs, causing her to choke violently and tears to come out. Jiang Shengsheng wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes in embarrassment and smiled at Secretary Yang. "You see, I never knew that cigarettes were so difficult to smoke." It was as if she didn't know that Miss Jiang was actually loving her so painfully. Secretary Yang looked at her like this, with a look of pity on his face. "Miss Jiang, it's getting cold, I'd better take you back." Jiang Shengsheng lowered his head, stomped out the cigarette butt, and pointed to the empty space next to Miss Jiang's grave. "Secretary Yang, please help me buy this piece of land." Secretary Yang responded subconsciously, then belatedly realized, "Here? Who is it for?" Jiang Shengsheng pointed at himself, "Me." Secretary Yang had a strange expression on his face, but he didn't ask any more questions. He just said, "The cemetery staff said that the land here is worth 100,000 yuan. Can you pay for it from Mr. Lu or you can pay for it yourself?" Jiang Shengsheng suddenly realized that no matter how rich Lu Mingfei was, this money had nothing to do with her now. She even doesn't have enough money to buy herself a piece of land for burial. After a long while, she gave a bitter smile and said, "Then let's buy a cheap one, the cheapest one, so that we can have a place to stay." In fact, it's good that Miss Jiang walked in front of her. She didn't know she was sick. In this way, Miss Jiang must feel that she is living a very happy life in another world. That's also good. Miss Jiang suffered a lot in her life, but fortunately she didn't have to die before her. After the funeral, Jiang Shengsheng returned to Yuecheng early and was surprised to see the lights on in the villa. But when she pushed the door open, what she saw were several pieces of women's clothes lying on the floor. Jiang Shengsheng's breathing stagnated, and he vaguely heard a woman's sweet laughter coming from upstairs. She moved up the stairs slowly and with difficulty. "Mr. Lu, Sister Shengsheng will find out when she comes back to the villa, right?" It was Zhou Yun's voice. "Her mother is dead. She won't be back in the next few days, don't worry." When Lu Mingfei said this, Jiang Shengsheng just walked to the door. Zhou Yun chuckled twice, then, "Mr. Lu, shouldn't you go and take a look too?" Lu Mingfei sneered disdainfully, "That's not my mother. She was the one who urged me to get married for several years." "Oh, she's old, she's a shrew, it's normal for her to rush you to get married." Jiang Shengsheng's hand on the door handle couldn't stop shaking, and his stomach was churning and he wanted to vomit. She didn't dare open the door to see the scene inside, but tears rolled down to the ground unconsciously. It turned out that her 8 years were nothing more than this in Lu Mingfei's eyes. She didn't feel the heart-wrenching pain she had imagined, but it was as if a gust of wind had blown through her heart, destroying the originally barren place into a desolate place with no grass growing. Jiang Shengsheng suppressed all his nausea, wiped away his tears, and took out his cell phone from his pocket. She turned on the video function and filmed everything from the scattered clothes downstairs to the bedroom door. Then she took a deep breath before opening the bedroom door and pointing the camera at the 2 people inside. The door was suddenly opened, which scared Zhou Yun. After seeing Jiang Shengsheng, she quickly got under the quilt and dared not show her face. However, her reaction was still a beat slow, and what should be photographed had already been photographed. The moment Lu Mingfei saw her, his face was filled with shock and anger. "Why are you back?" Jiang Shengsheng didn't expect that his first words would be like this, but she just put away her phone expressionlessly and said, "Wait for you downstairs." After saying that, she slammed the door and went back to the living room. The scene just now made her feel nauseous from the bottom of her heart. Her stomach felt like something was churning. She wanted to vomit but also had waves of dull pain. She drank a sip of hot water and felt a little better. Lu Mingfei had already put on his clothes and came downstairs. Seeing Jiang Shengsheng, Lu Mingfei's face was obviously unhappy. "Are you spying on me?" Jiang Shengsheng just kept looking at him, but he couldn't find a trace of guilt on his face. Instead, he seemed to be ready to call him to account. She felt pathetic for herself, glanced upstairs, and said with only bitterness in her tone, "Don't you have anything to explain?" Lu Mingfei changed his gentle appearance and snorted disdainfully, "She and I are just playing around. As long as you don't make trouble, I will still abide by the agreement and marry you." Jiang Shengsheng couldn't believe his ears. How could such words come out of his mouth? She seemed to no longer recognize the man in front of her. He was now blinded by money and status and had completely changed. "I can't tolerate any sand in my eyes. If you don't send her away, I will release the video. Please think about whether you are willing to give up the current development of the company for her." She left no room for negotiation and no room for retreat in their relationship. Jiang Shengsheng knew best how difficult it was for Lu Mingfei to achieve everything he had today. If this kind of negative news got out and the stock market was turbulent, the impact would be immeasurable. Lu Mingfei knew that what she said was true, and he couldn't help but feel annoyed. "You threaten me? Do you know that without me you will get nothing?" Jiang Shengsheng looked at his current face and couldn't help but despise himself for being blind. But she didn't have much time left alive, so it didn't matter whether she offended him or not. She sat up slowly and looked at Lu Mingfei calmly. "Lu Mingfei, it's been 8 years. What do I want from you? Money? Name? Status? What have you given me? Or do you think the girl upstairs really loves you? Over the years, she has met so many different kinds of people, so how could she be wrong?" Zhou Yun only treated Lu Mingfei as a big tree. By climbing up to him, she began to dream of becoming a phoenix. Lu Mingfei was speechless for a moment and wanted to argue, but he didn't know where to start. Jiang Shengsheng felt that this villa was so oppressive that she couldn't breathe. Just staying here made her feel sick. She said no more and turned away. Jiang Shengsheng found a hotel to stay in. He lay on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling above his head. His eyes slowly began to feel sore. "After 8 years of relationship, it turns out that being betrayed can be so bloody. My heart feels like it's nailed to the wall in a bloody mess." She even thought that if Lu Mingfei could completely break up with Zhou Yun, she would be able to live the rest of her life in a daze, since she didn't have much time left to live anyway. Confused happiness and sober pain are both difficult to choose. She spent 3 days in the hotel in a daze. On the 4th day, at Lu Mingfei's instruction, Secretary Yang called her. Zhou Yun was fired. Apart from that, Lu Mingfei did not make any statement, not even a perfunctory apology. Secretary Yang came to the hotel to pick her up, but when she returned she was still faced with an empty villa. "Oh, Mr. Lu has to go on a business trip these days. He said he will be back in a few days. He asked me to arrange the wedding according to your wishes." Secretary Yang explained with a smile. But Jiang Shengsheng soon realized something was wrong. He didn't even take you with him wherever he went on business trips. Don't you know his business itinerary? Secretary Yang was choked by the question and shook his head. "Boss Lu never told me, I really don't know. If it's not a business trip, then it's a private trip." Jiang Shengsheng looked at the familiar villa, and scenes came to his mind of the day when he saw Lu Mingfei and Zhou Yun together here. She clenched her fists tightly, and suddenly swept the cups on the table to the ground. "Find some time to get rid of all the things in the villa and replace them with new ones." "Replace them all?" "Nothing, no clothes, no furniture, no carpets, nothing." Whenever she thought of Zhou Yun having touched this place, she felt dirty from the bottom of her heart. That night, she received a strange text message on her mobile phone. It is a photo of a man's back, with someone holding his hand. And she was so familiar with this back figure, it was Lu Mingfei. As for who the woman in the photo was, Jiang Shengsheng didn't need to delve into it. Whoever it wasn't her. This was what Lu Mingfei called a business trip. He didn't even have to find a serious excuse and just betrayed their 8 years of relationship as if it was a matter of course. Jiang Shengsheng looked at the photo for a long time and finally picked up his phone and called the number that sent the message. The phone rang twice and was immediately connected. A familiar female voice came from the other end of the line. The first thing the woman said was, "Sister Shengsheng, Mingfei and I are truly in love, can you please help us?" True love? Haha, what a sarcastic word. I am obviously Lu Mingfei's serious girlfriend, so why should I give up my position to someone who came later? Zhou Yun, I know what you are thinking. There is no need to use excuses like love or not to justify yourself. There was silence on the other end of the phone for a while, and then he said, "You should also know that if you force a man who has changed his mind, you will only torture yourself. Sister Shengsheng, I'm pregnant. If I tell him, what do you think he will do?" Pregnant? These words were like a bucket of cold water poured over Jiang Shengsheng's head. He froze in place, unable to calm down for a long time. Child. She and Lu Mingfei once had a child, but she lost him for the so-called career, and later, they never had another one. And this woman who was younger than her took away her lover and had a child. It seemed that all her efforts and companionship over the years were meaningless. Others were a family, but she was just an outsider. Zhou Yun had already hung up the phone. It took her a long time to react, and then she called Lu Mingfei again. As soon as the call was connected, the person on the other end of the phone had a very cold attitude. What's up? Jiang Shengsheng tried his best to keep his voice steady. Where are you? Who are you with now? Lu Mingfei immediately looked impatient. I'm on a business trip. I fired the person just like you said. Can you please stop being suspicious? If you don't believe me, there's no need to get married. After saying that, Lu Mingfei immediately hung up the phone. Jiang Shengsheng looked at the black phone screen and couldn't help but smile sadly. What's going on? It's as if she forced and begged him for this marriage. Yes, she is a stepping stone, trash that others can discard at will after using her up. Lu Mingfei no longer needs her now that he has achieved success, so it doesn't matter if he abandons her. What Zhou Yun said was right. If a man changes his mind, even if she forces him to stay by her side, she will be the only one who suffers. With trembling hands, Jiang Shengsheng collected a few pieces of clothes and his ID and left. She left the key to the villa in the house. She looked back at the lights on upstairs and bought a plane ticket in the night. After attending a cocktail party, Lu Mingfei drank a little too much and his stomach was churning. He was sent back to the hotel and vomited for a long time before he felt better. Shengsheng, where's the hangover soup? After saying that, he dry heaved into the sink again. Zhou Yun came forward with a cup of hot water. Mingfei, come here, drink some hot water to warm yourself up and you will feel better. Hearing the sound, Lu Mingfei sobered up a little and washed his face with cold water. He saw the hot water in Zhou Yun's hand and frowned. He hadn't been drunk for a long time, and he hadn't been home for a long time. Naturally, he hadn't drunk the sobering soup prepared by Jiang Shengsheng for him for a long time. Thinking of Jiang Shengsheng, he felt inexplicably irritated. Just seeing her lifeless face made him feel suffocated. Zhou Yun took the initiative to move forward and spoke softly. Mingfei, when are you going to let me return to the company? Lu Mingfei subconsciously turned sideways and rubbed his brows. Don't worry about the company's affairs. Just tell me if you need money in the future. He knew very well that Zhou Yun's workability was very average and she was more than enough to be a vase, but if he really married her, she would definitely not be a good wife. But Jiang Shengsheng is different. Although she is boring, she can help him a lot in his career. As for feelings, I must have liked her before, but I don't know why I don't like her anymore now. Lu Mingfei didn't know why he suddenly thought of Jiang Shengsheng, even though she was so annoying. Yes, annoying. After spending a few days out with Zhou Yun, I returned to Yueqing and the weather had become a little colder. As soon as Lu Mingfei arrived at the company, Secretary Yang brought him a contract. Boss Lu, our cooperation with Fu Group will expire at the end of the year. I contacted them today, and they don't seem to have any intention of renewing the contract. Lu Mingfei raised his eyebrows and said, don't worry about it. Jiang Shengsheng is in charge of the business of Fu's company. Isn't she on good terms with the two brothers of the Fu family? Are you afraid that the Fu brothers will run away? Secretary Yang secretly wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, thinking to himself, judging from Fu's tone this time, he really doesn't intend to cooperate anymore. But he was in the way of Lu Mingfei, so he couldn't say it directly, and only said, Miss Jiang doesn't seem to be in good health recently, and she may not have the energy to take care of the cooperation with Fu's too much. Poor health? Lu Mingfei looked unhappy. Isn't it just a cold? It's been so long and you haven't recovered yet? After saying this, his heart skipped a beat for no reason. Jiang Shengsheng did not look well recently. He thought it might be because she was sad about her mother's passing. His expression eased a little, then let her take a break for a while, and we'll talk about it when she feels better. Thinking of her increasingly paler face and thinner appearance, he felt a little bit of pity in his heart. To be honest, Jiang Shengsheng was so good to him that there was nothing to say, and it seemed that he had been doing something a little too much recently. Forget it. I'll take some time to coax her and say a few nice words in a few days and everything will be fine. Lu Mingfei knew that Jiang Shengsheng loved him. After so many years, she had long been unable to leave him, so he could be unscrupulous in this relationship. Secretary Yang saw the hesitation on his face and asked, how about I help you pick out some gifts for Miss Jiang? Lu Mingfei came back to his senses and waved his hands irritably. No, otherwise she will get spoiled and think that she will get gifts as long as she loses her temper. He was annoyed by women who became spoiled because of their favor, but he never thought about when he had given his favor to Jiang Shengsheng. He also didn't know that the woman he thought he could play with for the rest of his life had quietly left his life. Firm and resolute. Not even a goodbye. It was discovered that Jiang Shengsheng had left Yueqing a week later, only 3 days before the wedding date set by Lu Mingfei. He arranged the company's affairs and asked Secretary Yang to pick up people to take wedding photos. But Secretary Yang said that no one lived in the villa anymore, Jiang Shengsheng's cell phone could not be reached, and no one knew where she had gone. Lu Mingfei then realized something was wrong and drove back to the villa in a hurry, only to find that the villa was empty. The phone call was not going through, and Jiang Shengsheng was nowhere to be found in the places he used to go. Lu Mingfei made a special trip back to Jiang Shengsheng's hometown. The old house had not been lived in for a long time and there was a thick layer of dust. Only then did he realize that Jiang Shengsheng seemed to have suddenly disappeared from his life. That very night, Jiang Shengsheng took the initiative to call him, had a few words with him, and left without even saying goodbye. Only then did Lu Mingfei remember to ask about Jiang Shengsheng's recent life. Miss Jiang rarely goes out. She spends most of her time at home waiting for you to come home. However, since her mother passed away, she seems to have been in a bad mood. Lu Mingfei was silent for a moment. He knew that when her mother passed away, she saw him and Zhou Yun with her own eyes. Anything else? Secretary Yang thought for a moment before saying, Miss Jiang bought a plot of land in her mother's cemetery, and the owner of the grave is herself. I see that Miss Jiang has lost a lot of weight recently, and perhaps she is seriously ill. Lu Mingfei frowned tightly. Very serious? What does very serious mean? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Mr. Lu, you said before that Miss Jiang was sick and asked me to take her to see a doctor, but Miss Jiang didn't want to go, and you also said, let her do whatever she wants. Lu Mingfei was silent. He didn't forget, he was just too busy. Yueqing is not big, and he and Jiang Shengsheng can be seen on almost every street here. They drank coffee together in the coffee shop in front, kissed under the street light at the corner of the street, and the breakfast shop on the next street had Jiang Shengsheng's favorite pan-fried buns. But now, no matter where I am, I can no longer find that familiar figure. On the streets of late autumn, the leaves of the rows of ginkgo trees on the roadside have withered to the point where only a few leaves are left, and the cold wind blows past my ears. Lu Mingfei walked aimlessly and suddenly remembered the winter of a certain year. At that time, he was just starting his own business and life was very difficult. Home was a long way from the company, and Jiang Shengsheng was reluctant to take a taxi, so he walked with him in the snow for more than an hour. Passing by the street, he bought 2 roasted sweet potatoes for $5. Jiang Shengsheng smiled and told him that this was her happiest moment. He looked at her lovingly and said that he would definitely let her live a good life in the future. But now everything is obviously fine, how come they got separated without noticing? Lu Mingfei glanced at the bright lights of the city and suddenly remembered that he rarely went home and rarely saw the light she left for him. When I returned to the villa, it was already late at night, so I turned on the lights. Lu Mingfei lay tiredly on the sofa in the living room, and suddenly a feeling of loneliness swept over him. Everything in the villa has been replaced with new ones. The place that once felt cozy now seemed strange and cold. The night was too quiet, and there was no trace of her presence in this house anymore. Secretary Yang called at this time. Lu Mingfei felt empty inside, but he still picked up the phone and answered it. Boss Lu, I found out that Miss Jiang bought a ticket to High City a week ago. We didn't find any boarding records, but the news that day said that a lady named Jiang got into a car accident on the way to the airport by taxi and died on the spot. The night wind blew open the curtains, and a chill suddenly seeped into every corner of the house. The curtains were whistling in the wind. Secretary Yang was still talking on the other end, but Lu Mingfei didn't hear a word. Jiang Shengsheng is dead? They were supposed to get married soon, so how could such a healthy person suddenly die? Lu Mingfei didn't feel too sad, but the blank part of his heart was like a huge wave that made his chest feel stuffy. Where is the body? He didn't realize that his voice was trembling slightly when he asked this question. There was a noisy sound of traffic coming from Secretary Yang's side, at the police station. I'm rushing over now. Lu Mingfei, on the other end of the phone, was silent for a moment before he finally spoke. No need, I'll go there myself. After hanging up the phone, Lu Mingfei drove straight to the police station without even having time to pick up his coat. The city's nighttime traffic was endless, and the red lights came on several times along the way, making him more and more anxious. In his heart, he was reluctant to go to the police station to claim the body, but Jiang Shengsheng no longer had any relatives. If he didn't care about her, she would be alone until her death. After all, he couldn't bear to let go of the 8 years of friendship. But as he got closer to the police station, he inexplicably felt a surge of fear in his heart. Excuse me, are you here to claim the body of Miss Jiang Shengsheng? Lu Mingfei looked at the uniformed policeman in front of him and was suddenly pulled back from his trance. Yes. His voice was still a little hoarse when he spoke. The staff took him to the morgue, and only the sound of footsteps could be heard in the empty corridor. Lu Mingfei walked step by step, and when he heard the door of the morgue being opened, his heart skipped a beat. There was a person lying in the middle of the morgue, covered with white cloth, with only a strand of long black hair showing. The staff lifted the white cloth, revealing only a bloody face. The accident was so serious that Miss Jiang's face was severely bruised and unrecognizable. We confirmed her identity through the documents in her wallet. Can you see if it's her? When Lu Mingfei saw this face, he turned his head slightly, unable to bear to look at it closely, and for a moment he felt as if he was holding back his breath. Yes. What is your relationship to the deceased? Lu Mingfei was stunned for a moment. We will be getting married in 3 days. The staff member looked at him sympathetically and handed him a body claim form to sign. If there are no other questions, you can take the body away. Lu Mingfei didn't even take a second look at the body and had it sent to the crematorium. When I walked out of the police station, it was already late at night. When I looked up, there was not a single star in the sky. Lu Mingfei's mood became heavy for no reason. He leaned against the car door and lit a cigarette, with the cold wind blowing across his face. He looked at the city surrounded by lights and recalled that there were not so many tall buildings here before. There was a noodle shop that had been open for many years, on the street corner in front. Jiang Shengsheng liked that shop very much. However, 8 years have passed, the noodle shop has moved away, and the city's bright lights are no longer as bright as before. And they never had the chance to meet each other again. He suddenly felt a little regretful, remembering that the last time he spoke to Jiang Shengsheng was when they had an argument. They didn't even have the time to say goodbye. After Jiang Shengsheng left, Lu Mingfei's life remained the same as before, with almost no changes. In the polite and bright president's office, Lu Mingfei sat in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the city below. The bustling crowds, the yellow autumn leaves, and the rushing cars are all familiar scenes from the past. He sat there for a long time without moving, the faint sunlight casting a shadow on his left cheek and slowly falling on his right shoulder. Mr. Lu, the financial statements here need your signature. Zhou Yun pushed the door in as usual, holding a pile of documents. But Lu Mingfei seemed not to hear it and did not move. After Jiang Shengsheng left, he could openly transfer Zhou Yun back to his side. Zhou Yun smiled coquettishly, took the initiative to sit on his lap, and hooked her arms around his neck. What are you thinking about? You're lost in thought. Lu Mingfei came back to his senses and saw Zhou Yun's young face. He still forced a smile and said, nothing. Don't you like the steak at the Jiaoling Road? I'll take you there later. Zhou Yun frowned and said angrily, I don't eat beef. The expression on Lu Mingfei's face froze for a moment. Yes, Jiang Shengsheng was the one who loved eating their steak. It seems that they have been together for too long. There are some things that he thought he had forgotten, but he doesn't know when they were deeply engraved in his mind. He stood up expressionlessly. My mother is coming to Yueqing to visit during this period. Please help me take care of her. After losing Jiang Shengsheng, Lu Mingfei's life became even busier. I used to go back to the villa once every 2 weeks, but now I hardly ever stay there, as if I have forgotten that place. Mr. Lu, Secretary Zhou's meeting schedule is too tight. If you rush back now, you may not be able to make it to the bidding meeting tonight. Lu Mingfei rubbed his brows tiredly. Didn't I say that I wouldn't take any external tasks this week? What happened? Secretary Yang wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, this was all arranged by Secretary Zhou. I will go and turn it down for you now. Lu Mingfei's face looked a little unhappy. After so long, no matter how he taught, it was useless. Zhou Yun still couldn't do this or that. When he and Jiang Shengsheng started a business together, he never had to worry about these things. Thinking of Jiang Shengsheng, he became even more irritated. She's just a woman he no longer likes and is tired of, so why does he keep thinking about her? The phone rang at the right time, interrupting his thoughts again. The caller was his mother, Su Yumei. Mingfei, what's wrong with this new girlfriend of yours? She even broke the pot when I was cooking chicken soup, and she started crying when I said a few words to her. Is she the eldest daughter of some family? Lu Mingfei frowned even more tightly. Forget it if you can't do it. It's the same if you hire a nanny to do it. Su Yumei raised her voice, on the other end. How can that be? How can I take care of you if I can't even come to the kitchen? Come on, you should at least find a girlfriend who is better than Jiang Shengsheng. She had heard that her son had a new girlfriend, so she came to Yueqing to see her. She didn't expect that this girl was not as good as Jiang Shengsheng in all other aspects except her looks. She was really angry. Hearing Jiang Shengsheng's name, Lu Mingfei felt as if his heart was suddenly stabbed. Zhou Yun now looks young, obedient and gentle, which makes him feel comfortable. But Jiang Shengsheng is better than her, and most importantly, Jiang Shengsheng loves him, and he once loved her very much. There will never be another Jiang Shengsheng. Never again. The wedding he had originally planned ended in vain without the heroine. He still wasn't very sad, but he would always toss and turn and sleep when he occasionally thought of the person who had been with him for 8 years on some nights. Hotel. A fierce battle had just ended in the room. The man raised his hand, pulled the woman into his arms, and lifted a strand of her hair to play with it. Are you staying here tonight? Zhou Yun raised her face from his arms, looking shy. Well, Mr. Lu won't come to me today. But do you really want me to marry him? The man touched her head and comforted her. Of course, as long as you marry him, we will have endless wealth and glory. Otherwise, if he gets tired of you one day, wouldn't it be a waste of time? Zhou Yun nodded reluctantly. Don't worry, as long as Jiang Shengsheng leaves, Lu Mingfei will definitely marry me obediently. After all, she is pregnant now. Although Lu Mingfei, the mother, is a cunning person, she dreams of having a grandson. Even if the old witch is not happy, she cannot ignore her own grandson. Once she joins a wealthy family and has children, no matter how dissatisfied Su Yumei is with her, she won't be able to do anything about it. Don't worry, after a while, I will tell Lu Mingfei that I'm pregnant. By then, the child will be older and he will have to take it even if he doesn't want it. Zhou Yun had a sinister smile on her face, which was inconsistent with her apparent innocence. There was a heavy rain in Yueqing, and the temperature dropped sharply. It was winter soon. Lu Mingfei didn't pay attention and caught a cold. He had a fever and could only rest in bed. When people feel unwell, they always have wild thoughts. He had a dream when he was delirious with fever. He finally dreamed of Jiang Shengsheng for the first time. He dreamed of Jiang Shengsheng when she was 20 years old. She was young, beautiful, and had a bright and charming smile. At that time, Jiang Shengsheng was very afraid of thunder. When she heard thunder, she couldn't help but rub against his arms. She was afraid of the dark and liked to turn on the lights when she slept. When she was sick, he stayed by her side all night, fearing that she would feel uncomfortable. She used to be so weak and so pitiful, but who could have thought that such a girl would grow into a towering tree 8 years later, protecting herself from wind and rain. In the dream, Lu Mingfei held her hand and went to eat wontons from her favorite restaurant on the corner of the street, but when he turned around, he didn't hold her hand, and saw her standing in the middle of the road, and a truck hit them head-on. He watched Jiang Shengsheng's body fly out like a broken kite, and then fall heavily to the ground, leaving her blood all over the cold, hard concrete floor. When he rushed forward, he could only see Jiang lying there dying, saying it hurt over and over again. "Mingfei, I'm in pain, can you hug me?" Lu Mingfei held her in his arms and cried for help at the top of his lungs. However, the ambulance did not come, and Jiang Shengsheng died in his arms and never woke up again. For a moment, the grief almost crushed his heart and forced him to wake up from his dream. There was no light in the room, and when he opened his eyes, he could only face the suffocating darkness. He felt a cold tear sliding down the corner of his eye, reminding him of what had just happened in his dream. Lu Mingfei propped himself up and sat up from the bed, his head still aching badly. Even he himself didn't know why just a dream made him so uncomfortable, as if he couldn't describe the feeling. He only knew that he clearly no longer loved Jiang Shengsheng, which was why his heart still ached after waking up. Obviously Jiang Shengsheng was dead, and he had calmly accepted this fact. The door was opened at this time. Zhou Yun turned on the light and took some medicine in. Seeing that Lu Mingfei had woken up, she sat down beside his bed with worry in her eyes. "Mingfei, you're finally awake. You have a high fever. I was so worried." She handed over a cup of hot water and some medicine. "This is antipyretic medicine. Here, take it first." Lu Mingfei looked at the medicine in Zhou Yun's hand and suddenly said, "You can only take 1 pill of this red fever-reducing medicine a day." This made Zhou Yun stunned for a moment, and a trace of embarrassment flashed across her face. "Really? I didn't look carefully just now, and I thought that taking more antipyretics would reduce the fever faster." Lu Mingfei did not take the medicine, but suddenly found that some things seemed not as he thought. If Jiang Shengsheng was by his side when he fell ill this time, she would have prepared a cold towel and stayed by his side all the time. She would have carefully told him how much of each medicine he should take. No. Maybe, if Jiang Shengsheng was by his side, he wouldn't have gotten sick. Every time the weather changed, she would ask Secretary Yang to bring him suitable clothes so that he would not be too hot or too cold. He sneered at himself, then looked at Zhou Yun. "Zhou Yun, Jiang Shengsheng and I will not have a wedding, but I don't have any intention of marrying you. You can think about it again and decide whether you want to continue to follow me." Zhou Yun was not in his marriage plan from the beginning. She was just a new little thing. After the novelty wore off, she didn't seem to be very important. As soon as these words came out, Zhou Yun's face turned extremely ugly in an instant. She covered her belly and almost cried out, But I already have your child."